I don't say that last part enough. It's not what is the smallest change you can make. It's what is the best balance of the smallest change you can make for the greatest return on investment. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome back to Barbell Logic, and welcome back to the M.E.D. Masterclass. This is your producer, Trent, getting you started this morning. So, as I explained last week, the M.E.D. Masterclass was originally given to Barbell Logic coaches that were trying to improve their understanding of programming in light of the minimum effective dose, or M.E.D. programming model that Matt and Scott have laid out on the Barbell Logic podcast and continued to flesh out over the last couple of years. So the masterclass took place over several weeks, and I have edited down some of the recordings from that masterclass into a podcast format so that you can listen and hopefully learn and apply some of these lessons to your own programming. So occasionally you'll hear me pop in to answer questions that Matt has posed to the group because we didn't always have great recordings of all of the participants in the masterclass, so I'm going to answer for them and occasionally offer some commentary just to keep the conversation moving along. So this week in Masterclass number 2, we're going to be talking about the 3 rules of minimum effective dose programming and apply those to some actual programming problems post-LP. So the first 30 minutes of the conversation are going to revolve around the squat and are going to be covering the theoretical stuff that we talked about last week. Then around the 40-minute mark, we'll move to the deadlift, and around minute 52, we'll move to the press and the bench and talk about specific M.E.D. solutions to the programming problems that occur post-LP. I'll be leaving exact timestamps in the show notes if you want to skip around, so make sure you check those out. All right, let's get started.
So I want to back up really quick and do a quick review on something because it'll lead in. You'll see what I'm trying to do here in just a minute. What are the 3 criteria to pick exercises when you go into a gym?
So to quickly recap from last time, that is, number 1, we want to train the most muscle mass possible. Number 2, we want to use the most weight we can. And number 3, we want to do that over the greatest effective range of motion.
And all 3 of those are intimately connected, right? If I perform the lifts that use the most muscle mass, then those lifts will be able to use the most weight because I'm using the most muscle mass. They're directly related. The greatest effective range of motion gets me the most amount of work in the least amount of time. It's an economy thing, right? And by the way, it's also intimately connected to most muscle mass. If I just squat with a 4-inch range of motion, if I stand up tall out of a squat rack and I squat down 4 inches and come back up, how much did I use my hamstrings? How much did I use my glutes? Not that much. Okay, now why does that matter for M.E.D? Because if we look at M.E.D, we start to think about the principles. So those 3 things, as long as I do those things correctly, then I'm on the path to success. And this is important because we have to understand that you guys have probably heard us say this on the podcast, that consistency and technique are the 2 most important things that we do in the weight room, whether that's you, whether that's your clients. If they don't miss and their form is good, their form is solid, and continuing to get better, it's the most important thing. But those 3 criteria do not explain how to program those lifts. And so one of the things I thought about a lot this week that I think is really important, like I think it's a breakthrough. Like I've had a handful of these breakthrough moments as a coach, and I was like, wait a minute. I just thought of 3 things that are the overarching principles for M.E.D. programming. So number 1, we choose simplicity over complexity. We're going to choose simplicity over complexity. Now, that doesn't mean, and I want to be very clear, that complex training is wrong. Complex training is not wrong. It's that if simple training works, we are always going to choose simple over complex. At some point, if you're Matt Frazier, who's probably going to go win the CrossFit Games here in a few weeks, if you're his coach, his training must be complex. That guy's got to be the most well-rounded strength athlete in the world. How complex does your training have to be in the world's strongest man? It's the same sort of thing. You show up in Malaysia, you don't know what you're training for. You know you have to be strong. You know you have to be fast. You know you got to be able to be agile. But you don't know what exercises you're doing in the world's strongest man until you show up at the world's strongest man. So we're going to choose simple over complex when we can. Not necessarily because simplicity works better, although I would argue, and we will argue over the next several weeks, that simplicity does work better. But because why would you choose complexity over simplicity if simplicity works as well or better? It doesn't make any sense. And I hope that for most of you, I'm talking to you not just as lifters, but as coaches. So that's principle number one. There's 3 of them. Principle number 2, we're going to choose intensity, or we're going to prioritize intensity over volume. Now, for those of you guys that are in this world and in our community, and obviously it's a tiny little niche of people, everybody knows there's all these arguments over intensity over volume. We mentioned this last week. Why do we prioritize intensity over volume? On the most practical sense, why do we prioritize intensity over volume? So again, if we understand what intensity actually is, intensity is weight on the bar. Intensity is force production. Is there not just a correlation, but a potentially causation that volume can help drive up intensity? Sure it can. At some point, you're going to need the volume to build the muscle mass to drive up the intensity. But if I can drive up the intensity without driving up the volume, and by the word intensity, I literally mean the magnitude of the weight on the bar. If I can drive that up without increasing volume, why would I increase volume? And the third, we'll talk about these more, is economy over excess. And that economy applies to multiple things. Obviously, we're talking about economy of time. If I can have the same return on investment in a 40-minute workout that I can for a 2-hour workout, why would I do the 2-hour workout? I don't want to do that. None of you guys want to do that. And your clients don't want to do it. You have a duty to them to give them the highest return on investment for the tightest amount of time, right? We want to look at efficiency. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't ever be a time where some excessive amounts of training are going to be necessary to eventually move the needle. At some point, you get advanced enough that it takes some long workouts. If you're a marathon runner, at some point, you're going to have to do some excessive level workouts. But what we're trying to do right now is just get people strong. So we choose simplicity, intensity, and economy over complexity, volume, and excess. And I want to be clear. I want to say it one more time. I've already said it. Complexity, volume, and excess are not wrong. I'm not saying that complexity, volume, and excess don't work. I'm saying that as long as simplicity, intensity, and economy work, I want to choose those first. I'm going to give those precedence over the other ones. Okay. Questions about those 3?
So one person asked, what if your end goal or your client's end goal is not strength, but endurance or hypertrophy, building more muscle mass? Would you still prioritize intensity over volume in that case?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. So would I value, if my goal is hypertrophy, if my goal is endurance, muscular endurance, like my end goal is muscular endurance, would I always choose intensity over volume? No. So this is M.E.D programming specifically for strength. Now, does strength make everything else better? Yes, until it doesn't. We know we can't train for a marathon just by doing heavy squats and deadlifts. It doesn't work that way. But the other ones still hold true. So I'm still going to choose simplicity over complexity. And oh, by the way, even over the past several decades, people who do distance running have now incorporated far more interval-based sprints, tempo-based sprints that are shorter in duration and higher in intensity, rather than people who used to run marathons or half marathons going out and literally running 5, 10, 12, 15 miles every single day. They recognized that if they run 2 sort of long runs per week and 3 or 4 short burst interval-based runs every single week, it actually worked better. So I don't even know that I would argue that intensity is not important there either, right? And let's talk about that hypertrophy piece. You look at your very good bodybuilders, how strong are they? How strong are they in the grand scheme of things compared to like your dad? They're stronger than your dad, right? They're stronger than your dad. And what we tend to see, it's not that what people want to do is they want to take that pendulum and swing it all the way to the far end and go, well, Kai Green, world-class IFBB bodybuilder in the Mr. Olympia, like he's probably not going to emphasize intensity over volume. You're right. But I don't train Kai Green. I've trained a lot of guys at Missouri State University who are college boys who weigh 155, who just want to get big and jacked and actually don't care about getting strong, and prioritizing volume, doing their bench presses at 125 don't make them any bigger. If instead they get their bench press up to 275 and then they're able to do volume at 225 instead of 125, it's amazing the impact that has on their hypertrophy, right? So we can kind of consistently argue this. I think this is inarguable when it comes to strength. Everybody can make points and go like, well, okay, I can see where there's some times where maybe this doesn't always hold true for things that aren't specifically strength.
So another question here, what if you just need to take a mental break? Like, say you're an advanced lifter and you've been going for a while and you're just sick and tired of lifting heavy weights. Is it okay to take a few months off to just run a hypertrophy block and change the goal from strength to building more muscle mass, lowering the weight, and doing more volume?
Perfectly fine. No problem. But you also recognize that during that hypertrophy block, the primary goal isn't the addition of strength and force production, right? Like sometimes, like Brett McKay is in Vermont right now on vacation, and he has he's in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. He has no access to barbells. For 2.5 weeks, that guy's just going to do body weight CrossFit stuff. So we're not prioritizing intensity over volume because it's just not there right now. But that doesn't mean we're not going to do something, right? When we can, we're going to prioritize simplicity over complexity, intensity over volume, and economy over excess, because it's simple, hard, efficient, and effective, brutally effective. Until it isn't. And at some point, training is going to have to become more complex. And at some point, training is going to have more volume. And at some point, training is going to have to be less economical. Everybody knows this. Like it takes me a long time to train. If you squat over 500 pounds and deadlift over 600 pounds, you have another 3 or 4 sets of warm-ups you have to do. It just takes a while. But as long as I can stay as tight as possible to the left side of this, of simplicity, intensity, and economy, I'm going to do it. And so I do want to run these 3 things through the ringer over the next 7 weeks and go, okay, like where does this not hold up? Because we do know there's a place where you've got to increase some of these things. But I think increasing them for the sake of complexity or for the sake of volume or for the sake of excess, I just think it's being inefficient with our time, being inefficient with our clients.
So Scott chimed in here and made a good point too. Even when it's the right time in the lifter's career to do some hypertrophy, the goal is still to do hypertrophy with as much weight as possible. When you look at advanced lifters who have achieved both very muscular physiques and that are very, very strong, they're not doing hypertrophy work with super light weights. They're not doing squats at 135 for sets of 12. They're doing it at 315 for sets of 12.
So one of the things I think is really important to think about is that the vast majority of great athletes, great lifters, great competitive performers, great bodybuilders got that way in spite of their training, not because of it. You know this. Everybody knows this. Genetics, drugs, atmosphere, consistency. Remember, we're still talking about this is a programming class where I told you from the very beginning that the most important thing is consistency and form. Get consistency and form right first. And atmosphere might be more important than programming also. I don't know how well Westside Powerlifting's programming is, but I know when you put a bunch of monsters in the room competing with each other, they get really strong and they take a lot of drugs. So, All right, moving on.
So after the first M.E.D class, the coaches were asked to come up with some specific moves they would make for a lifter that was getting towards the end of the basic LP program. So squatting, pressing, bench pressing, and deadlifting. What are some of the first moves they'd make when that lifter stops progressing? So we're going to pivot at this point and start talking about actual practical applications of the M.E.D concepts that we talked about in the first masterclass.
We started to say, what are the changes that we make? Let's go lift by lift. In the squat, everybody's doing 3 sets of 5. Let's say everybody's doing 3 sets of 5 3 times a week. And they miss. What is the minimum effective dose change you can make for the greatest return on investment? This is huge. I don't say that last part enough. It's not what is the smallest change you can make. It's what is the best balance of the smallest change you can make for the greatest return on investment. Let me give you an example. If you're doing 2.5 pound jumps on squats and your squats start to die, can we go to 2 pound jumps on squats? Because that's a pretty minimum effective dose change. Can we instead of going up 2.5 pounds every workout, can we go up 2 pounds or 1.5 pounds? You could do that. What's the return on that investment? It's low. So what do you think, and there are several answers that are acceptable, what do you think is the best option for when somebody starts to fail or plateau specifically on the squat?
2 answers were given. One was you could just reset. In other words, deload the weight by, say, 10%, and then climb back up and see if the lifter could push past the point where they got stuck the first time. The other answer was given was a light squat day. So taking the middle squat workout of the week and then deloading that squat workout by a fixed percentage, like, say, 20%.
I think both are acceptable, right? I think based on the demographic, I think if you have an underweight male or a female, the first change could be to just go from 5 pound jumps to 2.5 pound jumps. I think that would be an acceptable move. I think that almost is like not even considered a minimum effective dose change. Like, in the beginning, a lot of times for normal guys, you might jump 10 or 15 pounds for the first couple workouts and then 5 pounds and it starts to slow down. Then you go 2.5. For underweight males, for most females, they might be at 2.5 pounds pretty quick. Then it starts to slow down. Then you have an option. You can go to a Wednesday light day, right? And you can do the same. Nothing changes about Monday's workout and Friday's workout. The only thing that changed was the intensity comes down 20%. So now you're doing an 80% squat for 3 sets of 5. Everything else looks exactly the same. What does that do? What does the Wednesday light day allow us to do? What are we doing when we do that?
The answer was recovery. So by adding that midweek light day, we're essentially extending the SRA cycle from Monday all the way through to Friday instead of having it go from Monday to Wednesday and then Wednesday to Friday.
That's right. And I would argue that what you're really doing is that the fatigue in the 2-factor model, which is just a slightly more detailed SRA model, is that fatigue has continued to build up. In the beginning, you squat on Monday, you completely recover, and you squat on Wednesday. And you completely recover, and you squat on Friday. But then the day comes 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, 8 weeks in, at some point where you're clearly not completely recovered. Most of us have gone through this. Hopefully everybody's gone through it. And you get to the point where the fatigue, the magnitude of the fatigue, it goes from right after the workout, it goes from 0 or low to a magnitude of 6. And then the fatigue comes back up to about a 3, and then you work out again, and it doesn't go to a 6, it goes to a 7. And then it comes back up to a 4, and then it drops down again, and now it's an 8. And the magnitude of the fatigue, if you think about it, we talk about minimum effective dose. What if it's like a half-life of a drug you take? And the half-life is a 3-day half-life or a 4-day half-life. But you have to train every 2 days. Then over time, that fatigue continues to build up. What does Wednesday do? That Wednesday light day allows the fatigue to dissipate. It lets the half-life of the drug clear the system, the fatigue, to clear the system or mostly clear the system before you give it another dose of stress. That's what the Wednesday light day does. Can you think of something more simple than that gets us a good return on investment? Pretty simple. Okay, so then after we do our light day Wednesday, and I'm making progress on Monday and Friday, or I'm setting PRs on Monday and Friday. I'm getting new 3 set of 5 PRs every Monday and every Friday, and then that slows down and plateaus. What would I do on squats? What would be the next potential move? There's a few out there.
One coach suggested a medium squat day.
So now you've got a heavy day or a high stress day, a low stress day, which is Wednesday, and maybe a medium stress day on Friday. You could do that, right? I think that's perfectly acceptable. I think that I could come up with at least one other option that's an even smaller change for even a greater return on investment. Because, and here's why. How often can you make quantifiable progress on HLM?
In case you didn't know, HLM is short for heavy, light, medium.
How often are you making quantifiable progress? Weekly. And you're really making quantifiable progress every workout, right? But you're really looking at the highest intensity day. How often do I put more weight on the bar than I've ever had on the bar before in HLM or Texas Method or any of those styled Old Man Texas? Any of those things? Once a week. Now, is there a minimum effective dose change I could make following a Wednesday light day after the Wednesday light day stops working?
One answer was a top set or top sets followed by back off sets at a lower percentage weight from the top set. Another coach suggested moving to 5 sets of 3 instead of 3 sets of 5.
Absolutely. Perfectly acceptable thing to do, especially for females or older populations. Why doesn't that work for men who are middle age and younger? Let me be honest. I don't know. I mean, it definitely has something to do with neuromuscular efficiency. We know that, right? As the intensity gets really high on 5 sets of 3 for lower body lifts, doing those 5 sets across, for whatever reason, just I can't make it work very long for my guys, for my middle age and younger men. That's the experience that I have. Will you find published studies on that in the NSCA journal? Nope. Does it mean it isn't real? I mean, I don't know anybody that has more data than we have on clients at this point, right? Will it work? Can you move a guy who's 30 years old from 3 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 3 on squat and make progress? Yes, of course you can. How long will it work? My experience says not that long. I don't know why. Here's what I find. Instead, if you do 1 top set followed by 2 back off sets of 5, so 1 top set of 5, we're still, the weight on the bar continues to go up for the top set of 5 on Monday and Friday. Wednesday's still a light day. And then the 2 back off sets around 90%, so a 10% deload on those 2 more sets. Then wherever they miss tells me what's going on. Now they're supposed to come in and hit 1 heavy set of 5 followed by 2 back off sets of 5. What happens if on the very first set of 5 they hit 4? Then what do?
One solution is to decrease the number of reps on your top set while increasing the number of reps on your back off sets.
Absolutely right. You could go to a top set of 4, a top set of 3, followed by some down sets of 5. Or Nick said you could also repeat next week. A repeat next week just would require a conversation with the client. What happened? Like, oh, I slept 3.5 hours last night, right? I had to work a late shift. I got called in for a family emergency. I got in a fight with my wife. I didn't eat dinner. If remember that when we are talking about this fitness and fatigue theory, while that fatigue is it's considered 2-factor, you realize that fatigue is actually, it can be split into 2 different factors. There is fatigue that is a result of the training stress, and there is fatigue that is a result of all of the other stressors, right? If you have a manual labor job, it's late July, and you're pouring blacktop asphalt all day long, that's going to be tough, right? Manual labor jobs, stressful work environment, fired by your boss, kid got put in rehab, whatever. I mean, like, life is stressful. That's why coaches matter. If it's one of those issues and I hear about it and I've developed a relationship with my client, and by the way, why it's important, this is another really important reason to develop a good relationship with your client. We have an open relationship. That's open relationship means something else in today's world. I'm going to say something different. We have a transparent, vulnerable relationship with each other. We can talk about, like, hey, I got in a fight with my wife or my husband, or I'm in trouble at work and I got written up or whatever, or I didn't eat. Then I can say, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to make sure you get 8 hours of sleep a day. If you only sleep 6 hours at night, you're going to give me a 2-hour nap during the day. You're going to make sure you get this many calories in, and we're going to try it again. So what Nick said is exactly right. What Dan said is exactly right. If all the external fatigue stress factors are where they should be, then Dan's idea of 1 top set followed by 2 drop sets is probably the right move. If there are external factors that they're like, man, I had to, I'm in the National Guard, I had to go this weekend, and they made us ruck 22 miles with a backpack on, like, okay, then let's try it again next week. You'll probably be okay. And you get that stuff all the time. Okay, so what most of you came up with was some combination of those things on your homework assignment. So micro-loading at some point. By the way, I do not micro-load. I personally do not micro-load lower body lifts for men who are younger and middle-aged. I do not micro-load them. That doesn't mean it's wrong. I make 5-pound jumps. I'm not going to make a 2.5-pound jump on a deadlift. I mean, like, are there outliers? If you got some guy that weighs 120 pounds, like, sure, maybe. But for a normal guy, weighs 200 pounds, 205, he's 28 years old, looks like Cody and Nino. I'm not going to take a guy like Cody, or really most of the guys are on this call, and I'm not going to make your deadlift go up 2.5 pounds. It's not enough stress change to disrupt homeostasis. Minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment. Is the dose enough to give me a return on investment? I'm seeking this strength adaptation. Again, my experience says a 2.5-pound jump is not enough. Now, it will be on the upper body lifts, right?
So one question came up at this point, and that was, how do we know what percentage to use on the back off sets? So if we have somebody do a top set followed by a couple back off sets at, say, 90%, where do we come up with that 10% deload number? Why not 15%?
Why can I not know exactly how much back off? Because what if the guy's top set of 5 is 475? He probably needs to back off more or less than 10%. He probably needs to back off more. He might need to take a 12% to 15% drop. Might need to be 20, probably not 20, but somewhere there.
So to illustrate this point, Matt contrasted 2 examples. One is a male coach who has a 585 1RM squat. This person is doing a 5RM in the low 500s. And the other example is a female coach with a 160 5RM squat. So the male coach who's doing a 5RM somewhere in the 500s probably can't do 5 sets of 5 at 90% of that, because that's still 450 plus pounds. On the other hand, the female who is squatting 160 for a 5RM probably could do something more than 90% for her 5 sets of 5 volume day because the absolute weight of those 5 sets of 5 isn't that much. So the point here is that when you're considering back-off percentages, the absolute weight on the bar or the magnitude of the stress has to be considered.
So that's why we have to understand the principles that lie behind this and not actual rules, because they're not going to work across the board because demographic changes, neuromuscular efficiency changes, those things change. What I'm looking to do is continue to drive up stress without driving somebody in the ground, right? Economy, efficiency piece, intensity continues to go up, and I want to keep it as simple as possible. So squats, we can go to that Wednesday light day, and then we do a top set and then back off sets. Now, once the top set and the back off sets stop working, and they will because everything stops working, then I have to get slightly more complex. What might I do in squats after the top set of 5, after I'm doing one set of 5 and then a back off 2 sets of 5 at 10% or so, back off, when that slows down and I'm still doing a Wednesday light day, then what might I do? There's certainly more answers that could work at this point.
One answer was increase the volume.
Good. Now, what are the variables that can be manipulated? So far, the only variables that we have manipulated are intensity and playing with sets and reps a little bit, but the volume has stayed the same, right? We've always done 15 working reps. We've done 5 sets of 3 for some demographics. We've done 1 top set of 5 and 2 back off sets of 5 for other demographics. But we've done 15 work reps in a workout on Monday and Friday. When that stops working, I only have a couple other options. And one of the options would need to be, I probably need to start making my first change in volume. And I'm going to probably start making minimum effective dose changes to reduce volume on one of those 2 workouts while increasing intensity. Let's say it's Friday. So now I'm going to, instead of going from 3 sets of 5, maybe I'm going to go a top set of 3 and 2 back off sets. Maybe the 2 back off sets are 2 back off sets of 5 at first, and then they go to 2 back off sets of 3. Now I'm only going to do 9. I'm doing a top set of 3, 2 back off sets of 3. That's only 9 working reps. If I do that on Friday, what might I do on Monday? You might go the other direction. You might reduce intensity 10 to 20% and increase the volume on Monday. And now you have a heavy, light, medium styled training. Now you have a day on Monday that looks like 4 or 5 sets of 5, or it's higher volume and slightly less intensity. You have a lighter recovery day on Wednesday. We call it recovery day because it allows fatigue to dissipate, but it doesn't mean it's not a stressor. If I just need the recovery and I don't need any stress, this is why that 2-factor model is important. If I can do a workout where I can still get some beneficial fitness from it on Wednesday while allowing fatigue to actually dissipate on Wednesday, then I can come in on Friday and I can go heavy. Not just heavy, but heavier than I've ever gone before in my entire life. More weight could be on the barbell than I've ever had on that Friday. And so now in 5 steps, we went from LP to a Texas method or heavy, light, medium or old man Texas method week-based program. We went micro loading number 1, Wednesday light day number 2, top set and 2 back off sets number 3, number 4, top set on Friday with maybe 1 back off set. So with 2 sets, we reduce volume on Friday, and then we increase sets on Monday. And now I have in 5 steps moved from LP to a weekly progression that looks like heavy, light, medium or Texas. And those are the same program, by the way. There are 50 different ways to run heavy, light, medium, and Texas method is one of those. Just understand the concept. The concept was, okay, at some point you get to a 4-day split and you can have some accessory movements in there, and maybe back extensions aren't the right thing, right? Heavy, light, medium, Texas method, old man Texas method. And by the way, heavy, light, medium could also be A better wording for that, the better lingo for that is probably high, low, medium in stress. It's a high stress day, a low stress day, and a medium stress day. It doesn't always mean the intensity is high. As a matter of fact, typically in an HLM workout, in an HLM type program, the hardest day is the what day?
Volume day.
5 sets of 5 makes me depressed. Now, maybe it's not me. Maybe it's just me. Like Mondays, if you're doing Texas method, on Mondays you get up, you do 5 sets of 5. It's all you think about. You're nauseous. You have a hard time eating breakfast. You're like, I don't want to do this, right? Now, Nick is right. Wednesday is a shocker day, is what Wednesday is. Because you're like, oh man, this is awesome. I get to reduce 10% off of what I did on Monday and only do it for 3 sets of 5 instead of 5 sets of 5. This is going to be easy. And then you get the weight on your back and you're like, holy shit. It's not easy. Why is it not easy? Because they're still fatigued from Monday. Now, the SRA says we don't train on Wednesday if they're still fatigued. That's why I don't like the simplicity of SRA all by itself. It is right. It's just not quite complete. With the stress recovery adaptation model only, I train, the stress drops my performance. I have to wait just the right amount of time to recover above baseline. And when I hit the apex, I would train again. Well, that's really hard to plan for. The fitness fatigue model says it's a cumulative effect of the positives and the negatives. So can there still be some negative effect left over from Monday on a Texas method workout by the time I get to Wednesday? Yes, there can be. And it's okay to train. And you know what makes me feel better? Everybody that starts that workout on Wednesday who's ever done Texas method or even a heavy, light, medium and done their light day starts a workout and feels like shit. And at the end of that Wednesday, they're like, I feel better. I don't feel 100%. I don't feel completely recovered. I couldn't walk in and do a meet right now and hit PRs, but I feel better than I did when I started. That's the goal of the day. Positive effects from the training and less negative effects so that fatigue can generally dissipate. Preparing me for a massive intensity day on Friday, which, by the way, I will also argue to my deathbed is not just a performance. Hitting a 3-rep max or a 5-rep max, even if there are no drop sets, is an adaptable stress. You will adapt to that stress. It will disrupt homeostasis. You can do it. I do it all the time with my clients. I've had my clients do 5 singles across for 6 weeks in a row and hit PRs all 6 weeks in a row. No volume days. Just singles. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm telling you guys all to do that. What I'm saying is that everybody's seen hitting heavy singles, doubles, and triples are a stressor in and of itself. They're a different stressor than volume, but they are a stressor that will disrupt homeostasis and you will recover and adapt to it unless it kills you, and then you didn't. Then you die. Okay, let's talk about deadlift. So the thing that you'll note with the deadlift and the press and the bench press is that there are less things that you can do when it starts to die. And I think it's important that we talk about this. Like, everybody kind of talks about squat. It seems to be the thing that it's the first thing that we do in the workouts. Like, squat is typically what we do first. We do it 3 times a week. When you start to get to these exercises that have less frequency, moving out of LP and into that weekly sort of programming, you have less changes that you can potentially do. And so let's talk through deadlift. Again, let's just be super logical. Let's let those primary priorities of simplicity, intensity, and economy kind of reign true and take precedent. On deadlift, the beginning of those first few deadlift changes we're going to make probably looks similar to the squat. So What would be the first change you would make if somebody's deadlifting 3 times a week? Let's say, again, on a basic kind of novice linear progression, 1 set of 5, heavier every single day, starts to die. But they don't start to die. They plateau. What's the first change you would probably make?
So one answer was start alternating the heavy deadlifts with a light pull. It could be a chin-up or a barbell row or just a lighter deadlift.
Yeah, so you're probably also going to go to a Wednesday light day on the deadlift, right? Now, what does a Wednesday light day look like? And this is where you have some choice. And I definitely don't think there is necessarily an optimal answer for all demographics. So what are some options that we have with a Wednesday light day deadlift? What's one option? You could just do light deadlifts, which is probably the simplest change you could make, is just doing light deadlifts. Sybil's 83. You guys have probably heard me talk about her. Do you think she does power cleans or barbell rows? She's 83. She does light deadlifts. It's the simplest things you can do, right? Now, you have a high school athlete, you got a college athlete, you got somebody under 30, you got somebody who wants to build some power, wants to do power cleans. Is it okay to make that light deadlift day on Wednesday power cleans? Sure, totally fine. Totally fine. Let me tell you my main argument, you guys have probably heard it on the podcast, against power cleans, specifically as when considered a light deadlift movement.
So at this point, Matt raised the example of a young male who's a novice. He deadlifts 345 pounds for a set of 5. How much is that guy going to power clean on his first session?
Yeah, 135 to 155. Day one actually might be 95 pounds, 105, 115. And then he's going to start, once he kind of gets the hang of the movement, he's going to be doing 135 to 155. And then a month in, he's going to be doing 165, 175 maybe. Now, here's my question. Does a 135 to 175 power clean drive up a 350-pound deadlift? It does not drive up the deadlift. Does not drive up the deadlift. That doesn't mean it's worthless. I don't think it's worthless. I actually think there's some value to it. But what's the third primary principle of M.E.D programming? It's economy, right? How long does it take to learn the power clean? And then once you learn the power clean, how long does it take for the power clean to be heavy enough to drive up potentially your deadlift? For some people, sometimes never. As a matter of fact, I'd say for most people, sometimes never, right? That same guy that power cleans 95, 105 on his first session, and 4 or 5 or 6 sessions in, he's power cleaning 135 to 155. What would he be barbell rowing if he did barbell rows instead? 205? You know, I don't know. Somewhere in that ballpark, though, right? We're on the same page. Like, I'm not way off, right? Certainly, if he did a light deadlift, his light deadlift would be over 205, right? A Wednesday light deadlift day is probably the correct move for just about every demographic. The question is, what are you going to do with the light deadlift day? Are you going to have him actually light deadlift? Are you going to have him power clean? Are you going to have him barbell row? Are you going to have him chin? Or do 2 of those things? And by the way, I think it's perfectly fine to power clean and chin or to barbell row and chin. It's not that stressful. I start throwing in those chins. If they can chin, if they're underweight male especially, I start having them chin on like week 3 of LP. Just go. Just let them chin. It's not that stressful. They'll be fine. Right? A lot of time I have them do chins on every single workout. 3 workouts a week. Not that bad, right? If they're 260-pound guy, they got to use a light band or heavy band to grind, struggling. Maybe not. Sybil, 83 years old. Here's what Sybil does. Sybil comes in every single workout. She squats, but she can't squat with the bar on her back because she's 83 years old. So she does box squats. She holds a 50-pound medicine ball. Not that heavy. Which means that the primary driver for an 83-year-old Sybil for strength is what? It's the deadlift. So she deadlifts every single workout. And she only gets a light deadlift day if I watch her in person and she's smoked and it's not going to go well. Then I back her off like 15, 20 pounds. So what she does is she squats, she deadlifts, she bench presses or presses. We alternate those. And then she does lat pull downs, underhanded, supinated lat pull downs because she's 83 years old. She does them every single workout. And then I stick her on the Rogue bike, whatever that thing's called, the Echo bike, and I bust her ass on the Echo bike. Every single workout, 3 times a week. That's what she does. She's 83. And then she grabs her cane. She walks to her car. She's 83 years old, and she's had double hip replacements. Right? People can do this. It'll be fine. So deadlift, when deadlift stops working 3 times a week, we're going to go to a light day. And that Wednesday light day might just be a light deadlift. And then the next minimum effective dose change might be a barbell row instead of a light deadlift. Or maybe you just go right to the barbell row. Or maybe you go right to the clean, right? Or whatever. After that, and you're going to go to that Wednesday light day for everybody, then what do you do? Because now it gets a little more complicated than it does with squats. Now you're deadlifting heavy on Monday and Friday, and you're doing some light pull on Wednesday, barbell row, power clean, light deadlift. After that stops working, what's the next step you would make?
One suggestion was go to 2 sets of 3 on the deadlift.
Exactly 2 sets of 3, actually, is what I've written down. I mean, it's not the only thing, but I think that works really well. 2 sets of 3. We're going to get to the press and the bench press here in a minute. Does everybody understand that almost everybody can do more weight 5 sets of 3 than they can do 3 sets of 5? Takes a little longer, right? Because it's 5 sets. Same volume. Same 15 working reps. But the tonnage and the intensity continue to go up. The deadlift can be the same way. Almost everybody can do 2 sets of 3 with as much weight or more weight than they could do 1 set of 5. How many working reps is 1 set of 5? 5. How many working reps is 2 sets of 3? 6. And I can keep going up. Maybe I go to 2 sets of 3 on Friday, and maybe I keep it at 1 set of 5 on Monday. So I'm going to go 2 sets of 3 on Friday. And then whatever I did on Friday, I did 345 pounds on Friday for 2 sets of 3. And on Monday, I'm going to do 345 pounds for 1 set of 5. Same weight. I did it for 2 sets of 3 on Friday. I'm going to do it for 1 set of 5 on Monday. Then I'm going to go up 5 pounds on Friday again for 2 sets of 3. And then I'm going to do that same weight on Monday for 1 set of 5. Because that 1 set is hard to recover from. Would there be enough recovery for that? I don't know. Depends on the person. You know how you know? If they keep hitting the weight. If they failed, it wasn't enough recovery. Right? But I love 2 sets of 3. I love it. I love 2 sets of 3. 2 sets of 3 for females before I go to it for males. Since it seems to work better. Again, blanketed, just works. That's the experience. Then, so now you start going, okay, well, if I'm going to go 2 sets of 3 on Friday, let's say, what is the primary variable stress driver on Friday? Intensity, volume, or frequency? Intensity. The bar weight keeps going up on Friday, which then means, what could I do on Monday? I could add volume. And instead of going from 1 set of 5 on Monday, I could go to 2 sets of 5 on Monday at some point, which would probably require a 10% or so reduction in intensity. And that rides that out for another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then it stops working. And then what do? Then I go to a 3-rep max on Friday. And I do a drop set, minus 10% for 1 set of 3. Now I'm still doing 2 sets of 3 on Friday, but I'm doing a heavy set and a slightly lighter set. Because the primary driver on Friday is intensity. The bar weight has to go up on Friday or whatever day I decide is intensity. Part of the deal is if I'm going to go from 2 sets of 3 on Friday on deadlifts. And then at some point I'm going to go to 2 sets of 5 is the volume day for deadlifts, the first step, the M.E.D step for volume day. How much volume is that really? Can I do 4 or 5 sets of 5 of squat on Monday and 2 sets of 5 on deadlift? That's still not that much. It's just 7 working sets of lower body. It's a good hard workout, but it's doable, and it still shouldn't take 2 hours. Now, it's not going to take 40 minutes anymore. It's probably an hour and a half, And that's what you do. And so you just start making those steps, one step at a time, where you reduce the volume on Friday for deadlift while increasing the intensity, and you increase the volume on Monday while decreasing the intensity, one step at a time. 1 set of 5 on Monday, then we do 2 sets of 5 on Monday, then we do 3 sets of 5 on Monday. And the next thing you know, you were doing LP, you've made 5 or 6 changes, and now you have a volume deadlift day on Monday, a light deadlift day on Wednesday, and a heavy deadlift day on Friday. And here we are at HLM or Texas method. 3 days a week. It's the M.E.D steps. The way I wrote it down, quick recap because it took a little while. On deadlift, doesn't mean that this is the only way to do it. It's not the only way to skin a cat. I would go to a Wednesday light day first. That Wednesday light day for deadlift might be an actual light deadlift. It might be power cleans, might be barbell rows. Then I would drop to 2 sets of 3 on Friday and keep driving the intensity up on deadlifts. Then I would increase the volume on Monday from 1 set of 5 to 2 sets of 5 with probably a 10% reduction in intensity. And then when that slows down, I would go to a 3-rep max on Friday and I would drop 10% for a drop set. And then I would go to Monday. Monday is 2 sets of 5. Now we're going to go to 3 sets of 5, but we're going to drop it another 5 to 10% intensity. And I end up with a volume day, a light day, and a heavy day. Now it's heavy, light, medium, or Texas, or some variant thereof. Make sense? All right, let's wrap this up with press and bench. Press and bench. First thing you do, not a tricky question. It's something every one of you do, and if you don't say the right thing, I'm going to be like, oh, it's actually this, and you're going to be like, oh, yeah, that is what I do. Micro load. Everybody gets micro loaded on press and bench. Men who are middle age and younger are going to micro load from 5 pounds to 2.5. Can you go smaller micro loads than that? Yes, you can. Do I? I do not. I do not think that the return on investment is high enough to go to 1 pound jumps for dudes. Females, especially older, very underweight females, probably start their LP with 2.5 pound jumps on upper body lifts, and they will microload to 1.25 or 1 pound jumps, somewhere in that ballpark. I've never made half pound jumps on upper body movements for females. It's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. But even with Sybil, I just don't do it. Half pound jump, I feel like there's enough variance in the weights. I don't have calibrated plates. I've got nice plates at the gym. I don't have calibrated plates. I don't know how much 1/4 pound plates on each side of the barbell going up a half pound matters. But the first thing you're going to do is you're going to microload. And then what's the next thing you're going to do? For almost everybody.
One coach said, switch from 5s to 3s.
That's exactly right. You're going to go from 3 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 3. How much did the volume change? None. How much did the intensity change? Some. Kept going up. Tonnage went up. Volume stayed the same. Frequency stayed the same. We did what we had to do to make the weight keep going up. Went from 3 sets of 5 to 5 sets of 3. Minimum effective dose. Nice return on that investment. Works every single time. Then that slows down. What are you going to do? Same thing we did with squats. Top set and back offs. How many top sets? I talked to some of you guys. Some of you guys had 2 top sets and 3 back off sets. Is there anything wrong with that? Nope. It's fine. I don't do that. I do 1 top set and 4 back off sets are the same weight across. Do you know why? What would be the reasoning why I do that?
Someone here said, because it's less complex, you have fewer variables.
Correct. If they have 2 top sets of 3, and on their 2 top sets of 3, they hit their first set of 3, and then they hit a set of 2, and then they drop their 10 pounds or whatever for their 3 sets of 3, and they hit all of them. Now what do? They missed 1 rep on set number 2. Now I got to make it more complex. I have a complex mathematical problem I have to solve. If instead I have 1 top set of 3 and 4 back off sets of 3, wherever they miss tells me what the next change is, right? What's the goal with 1 top set of 3 and 4 back off sets of 3? What's the primary goal? 1 top set of 3, 4 back off sets of 3.
To add weight to the bar on the top set.
The top set of 3. Because intensity, we take precedent with intensity over volume for as long as we can. And right now we still can. And the day is coming when we can't. Those of you who are professional coaches on this call know that as soon as we have to start bringing in volume, it's not very fun anymore. Training doesn't always have to be fun, but it is part of our job to help keep, people should enjoy it. People should generally look forward to it. Scott and I have talked about this. Actually, I think we've got a podcast coming out this week. I don't know that it's come out yet, about the difference between people who are competitive and just love to train and people who train and it's like medicine. Training is medicine. It's that old spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. Like they do it because they know it's good for them, not because they enjoy it.
You can check that episode out. It's number 206, Training When the Passion Fades.
All right. So then once you go to 1 top set of 3 and back off, say 10% for 4 sets of 3 on the bench press and the press, after that, and that stops, and this is where we're going to leave off for the night, what is the next most logical step? You're alternating press and bench 3 days a week. You're doing 1 top set of 3, 4 back off sets of 3, somewhere in that ballpark, and then that stops working. What do? What is the problem with bench press and why the bench press and press stall on a 3-day split, 3-day full body workout split in a Texas Method heavy, light, medium sort of program? Why do the bench press and press stall? It's a theory. We don't know, but what do we think it stalls?
Some people suggested not enough recovery, and others suggested not enough frequency.
Not enough frequency. How many times am I squatting in those programs per week? 3 times. How many times am I pressing? 1.5. 2 times 1 week, 1 time the next week. How many times am I bench pressing? 1.5. It's not enough. At some point, I want to trade the stress of the systemic stress of the light squat day for the additional press and bench press. And then I'm at a 4-day split, Texas Method or 4-day split. And it's not a heavy light medium anymore. It's a heavy medium. It's an HM program. Make sense? I don't know what else you do with the bench press and the press. I know one thing that Hambrick has done. I've talked to him. If somebody can only train 3 days a week, what's your only other option?
So actually 2 options were offered up here. One is that you do all 4 lifts on certain days. The other one was you can do a 4-day split, but do it over a 9-day schedule instead of a 7-day schedule. So in other words, day 1 of the split would happen on Monday, day 2 on Wednesday, day 3 on Friday, and then day 4 of the split would happen on the following Monday. So now you have a more than a week-long cycle.
I know Hambrick has had some days where he has them maybe bench 1 day and press 1 day and bench and press the 3rd day. So they're still benching and pressing on a 3-day-a-week cycle twice each. They're deadlifting twice and doing some sort of light pull, which is probably a barbell row and chins. They're still squatting 3 times a week. But here is a secret that I think is not really a secret so much anymore, but if you haven't heard it, everybody in this community, when you have a client post-LP, as soon as they're through LP, who wants to move to a 4-day split, we're going to move them to a 4-day split because it's advantageous. Because now, and this is what we're going to talk about next week, not this week, is we can now start to think about fatigue, the fatigue of the workout and the fitness increases of the workout, both at a macro level and at a micro level. When all you do is full body workouts, then the entire body is fatigued. If I'm going to squat and then press and then deadlift, my whole body is fatigued. But if I'm going to squat and deadlift, and then the next day, I can actually come in and bench press and chin. And I'm okay. And I have some systemic fatigue, some full body organism fatigue. But my bench press and press and like the muscles of my chest, shoulders, triceps, biceps, arms, etc., they're fine. They'll be fine. And then I can rest a day like Wednesday, and then I can train lower body again on Thursday, and then I can train upper body on Friday. And as soon as I do that, I can take that heavy, light, medium, or Texas method type program, and I can then spread it out. It's the same amount of work in general, but I can spread it out over 4 days instead of over 3. And that matters because by the time you get to that point, for most people, Monday, towards the end of Texas method, is a 2-hour-long plus session. What's the third rule of M.E.D programming? Economy. We have a fiduciary duty to train our clients with economy, right? There's no reason to force my clients to pay me multiple hundreds of dollars an hour to coach them for a 2.5-hour-long session. It's bad business. It's bad for people, right? We're not just talking about economy of time. We're also talking about things like economy of exercise selection. And so are there times when we want to use exercises outside of the main 4 or the main 5 if you use power clean? Like, of course. Like, are there times to use variance on the main lifts, like variance on the squat or the deadlift? Yes, there are. But I would argue that one of our overarching principles is that we want to hold off as long as we can. In the same way that we want to hold off on adding lots of volume too early, I also want to hold off on adding too many exercises or a big exercise pool or exercise selection too early as well. Those days will come. They're coming. One of our jobs as coaches is to help our clients stay motivated and focused on the thing that's going to help them out on the long-term athletic development model. Right? I didn't invent that. The Soviets did. The Soviets had a model that worked for their athletes over the course of 30 years. If you're a personal trainer at Planet Fitness, you are never thinking of your client beyond the next 3 or 4 months or however long their contract is with you. That's not what we do. We don't lose clients. The churn on our clients, both in person and online, is so low that I'm trying to go, okay, if I do this exactly right, I can help this person still make progress 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's the goal. Thank you, guys. I'll shut this down, save the recording. Have a good one. See you guys.
All right, thanks guys for listening to another episode of Barbell Logic. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you have learned some new things that you can apply to your own programming problems. As always, send us your questions and comments at questions@barbell-logic.com. We will answer your questions on future Thursday question and answer sessions. Also, please go to iTunes and leave us a review. And while you're at it, head on over to barbelllogic.com, where you can also read some great articles about programming, about training, about nutrition. Everything we talk about in the podcast, we also write about at barbelllogic.com. Nick Salin and the rest of the Barbell Logic coaches have accumulated a great library of articles and content, so go check that out. In the meantime, take care. We will see you on Thursday.